Mac checked his watch for the umpteenth time. It was 11:45 p.m. His wife, Julia, would be home in just a few minutes from her hospital shift. He got up from the couch and headed toward the bedroom, trying not to make any noise to avoid waking his mother-in-law, Carla, who was sleeping in the guest room. Or so he thought. As soon as he entered the room, he heard light taps on the window. His heart leapt to his throat. He cautiously opened the curtains and saw Carla in the garden, motioning for him to come down. Mac hesitated for a moment, torn between desire and guilt. In the end, passion won out. He slipped on a hoodie and quietly exited the house. Carla was waiting for him, hidden behind a bush. "I thought you weren't coming," she whispered, pulling him in for a passionate kiss. Mac gave in to the embrace, forgetting all his torment for a moment. This clandestine relationship with his wife's mother had been going on for 6 months now. At first, it was just a moment of weakness, but the sound of footsteps made them jump. They quickly separated, hiding behind a tree. "It must be Julia," Mac murmured, alarmed. "Impossible. Her shift ends at midnight," Carla replied. Indeed, the footsteps receded. It was probably just the night watchman making his rounds. "It's too risky out here," Carla said. "Let's go to the tool shed." They furtively made their way to the small building at the end of the garden. Once inside, they resumed kissing fervently. Mac's hands roamed over Carla's still-toned body, 15 years older than his, but irresistibly attractive. She pulled off his hoodie, caressing his muscular chest. "I want you so badly," Carla panted. "I can't hold back anymore. Take me now." Mac didn't need to be told twice. He lifted her and sat her on the old workbench, sliding between her thighs. They made love passionately, trying to stifle their moans to avoid being discovered. Half an hour later, Mac slipped back into the house, his heart pounding wildly. He got into bed just as he heard Julia's car pulling into the driveway. He pretended to be asleep when she entered the room. "Honey, are you awake?" Julia whispered. Mac pretended to wake up. "Hey, love, how was your shift?" "Exhausting as usual. I'm wiped out." They embraced, and shortly after, Julia fell asleep. Mac, however, stayed awake for a long time, tormented by guilt. The next morning at breakfast, the atmosphere was tense. Julia alternated glances between her husband and her mother with a suspicious look. "Everything okay, Mom? You look off," she asked. "Yes, dear, just a bit of a headache," Carla replied, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Mac intervened to change the subject. "What time is your next shift?" "Today at 2 p.m., Julia said. Then she added, "By the way, last night when I got home, I noticed the shed light was on. Were you out there?" Mac nearly choked on his coffee. Yeah, I was looking for a screwdriver, but I couldn't find it." "At 11:30 p.m., she pressed, puzzled. "You know how your husband is," Carla interjected, trying to drop the subject. Mac breathed a sigh of relief. In the days that followed, he and Carla tried to avoid each other as much as possible to avoid arousing suspicion. But the passion was too strong, and after a week, they started seeing each other secretly again, taking advantage of Julia's night shifts. One evening, while they were entangled on the living room couch, they suddenly heard the front door open. Panicking, Carla hid behind the curtains while Mac frantically tried to pull himself together. Julia walked in, looking exhausted. "Hey, honey, I came home early because—" She stopped short, seeing her husband's guilty expression and noticing the disheveled cushions on the couch. "What's going on here?" she asked sharply. "Nothing, dear. I was just watching TV," Mac stammered. At that moment, a noise from behind the curtains drew Julia's attention. She stepped over quickly and yanked them aside with a swift motion, revealing Carla curled up in the corner. "Mom!" she exclaimed in disbelief. "What the hell?" An intense silence filled the air. Then Julia exploded. "How could you do this to me? You're both snakes!" She burst into tears and ran out of the room. Mac tried to follow her, but Carla held him back. "Let her cool down," she said. "We'll talk to her calmly tomorrow and explain everything." The next day, Julia was gone, taking some clothes and personal items with her. She wasn't answering her phone and hadn't shown up at work. Mac was desperate. "It's all my fault," he kept repeating. "I've ruined everything." Carla tried to console him, but she was worried about her daughter too. Days of anguish passed until one evening the doorbell rang. Mac rushed to open it, hoping it was Julia. Instead, he found 2 police officers standing there. "Mr. Bianchi, you need to come with us to the station," one of them said gravely. "Why? What's going on?" Mac asked, alarmed. "It's about your wife. There's been an accident." The world seemed to collapse around him. In a daze, Mac followed the officers to the car. As they drove away, he saw Carla standing at the door with her hands covering her mouth and tears in her eyes. At the station, a weary-looking inspector ushered him into an office. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this," he began. "Your wife, Julia, was involved in a serious car accident 3 days ago. She's in a coma at San Rafael Hospital." Mac felt his knees buckle. "Oh my God, can I see her?" "Of course, but I need to ask you a few questions first," the inspector replied. "Do you know why your wife was 200 kilometers from home?" I have no idea," Max stammered. "We thought she was with a friend." The interrogation went on for hours. Mac had to confess his affair with his mother-in-law, feeling more miserable with each word. Eventually, they let him go, but told him he was still under investigation. The following days were a blur of hospital visits, police questioning, and furious arguments with Carla. Max swung between despair over Julia's condition and overwhelming guilt. A week later, while sitting next to Julia's bed, he noticed a slight movement in her fingers. He immediately called the doctors. Incredibly, Julia was waking up from the coma. Mac cried with joy and relief, but the happiness was short-lived. As soon as Julia opened her eyes and saw him, the heart monitor spiked wildly. "Get out," she rasped. "I never want to see you again." The doctors ushered Mac out of the room. He remained in the hallway, shattered. Moments later, Carla rushed in. Julia's reaction to her mother was even worse. She screamed and threw whatever she could reach. In the days that followed, Julia adamantly refused to see either Mac or Carla. She would only speak with her younger sister, Laura, who had arrived from abroad upon hearing of the accident. It was Laura who delivered Julia's decision. She wanted a divorce from Mac and intended to cut ties with her mother completely. She also planned to press charges against both of them. Mac and Carla were devastated, but they knew they deserved it. A few weeks later, as Mac was packing his bags to leave the villa, he received a phone call from Laura. "Mac, you need to come to the hospital immediately," she said with a trembling voice. "Something terrible has happened." Heart pounding, Mac rushed to San Rafael. There, he found Laura in tears. "Julia is gone," she sobbed. "This morning, she wasn't in her room. No one saw her leave." News spread quickly. Law enforcement was alerted and search teams were organized. Mac and Carla, despite being forbidden to approach Julia, joined the search efforts, consumed by worry and guilt. Days of frantic searching passed, but there was no trace of Julia. A week after her disappearance, something unexpected happened. Mac returned home after another fruitless day of searching. Upon entering the bedroom, he found an envelope on the pillow. Inside was a handwritten letter. He immediately recognized Julia's handwriting. With trembling hands, he began to read. "Dear Mac, by the time you read this letter, I will be far away. I staged my disappearance to start a new life away from you and all the pain you've caused me. The accident never happened. I faked everything with the help of a few trusted friends to observe your reactions and see if there was anything left worth saving. But all I saw was more selfishness and lies. Don't worry, I am safe and well, but to me, you are both dead. Don't look for me, you will never find me. Goodbye forever, Julia." Mac collapsed to the floor, overwhelmed by emotion. All his tears couldn't ease the pain. He had lost the woman he loved forever. In the following months, despite the letter, Mac continued searching for Julia, consumed by remorse. Carla left the city, destroyed by guilt over what she had done to her daughter. Mac remained alone in the large villa, haunted by memories and regrets. A year later, while walking down the street, he thought he glimpsed Julia in the crowd. He ran after her, calling out her name. When he touched her shoulder, he realized it was another woman. At that moment, he understood that he had to let Julia go, accept the consequences of his actions, and move on with his life. But he knew he would never forgive himself for betraying and losing the only woman he had ever truly loved. The story ends here, but if you want to hear more tales of secrets and lies, click on one of the videos you see on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our intriguing stories. A new adventure awaits you every day.